You are just a woman. What do you even know about computer hardware? Step aside. And let the men work. The harsh shout ripped through the quiet atmosphere of the research center. David, an arrogant department head in an expensive suit, violently pushed Grace's hand away from the system. The heavy steel wrench flew from her grip, and hit the cold metal floor with a dry clank. Grace pressed her pale lips together tightly. Her fingers, covered in countless tiny scratches and burn marks from soldering irons, trembled slightly. She did not cry. But her eyes burned, with an astonishing, quiet resilience. The frustration, however, was absolutely impossible to hide. From a dark corner of the laboratory, a middle-aged man in a worn-out janitor uniform quietly stepped forward. He slowly bent down, picked up the wrench, and placed it back into Grace's calloused hand. With a knowing, firm nod. Talent never discriminates by gender. Only pure arrogance clouds true intelligence. If you are someone who always stands up for what is right, hit subscribe to join us on this journey. And right now, leave a powerful declaration in the comments section. I believe in a father's love and justice. Grace was, without a doubt, an extraordinary hardware engineer. But at this giant tech conglomerate, she was treated like a disposable, third-rate assembly worker, born into a struggling family. She didn't have fancy college degrees or powerful corporate connections to rely on. The only things she truly possessed were a genius-level mind and a deeply compassionate heart. Every single night, after finishing her exhausting 12-hour shift at the company, Grace did not rest. She gathered old, discarded computer parts from the recycling bins and took them back to her tiny apartment. There, she painstakingly soldered microchips under a dim, flickering yellow light until 3 in the morning. She completely redesigned entire chip architectures from scratch, just to build fully functional computers out of trash. Those computers were not for her to sell. They were carefully boxed up and sent to orphanages in the city's poorest slums. She wanted to give those forgotten kids a real chance to touch knowledge, and a fighting chance to change their miserable fate. Yet, at her workplace, Grace's brilliant, silent contributions were constantly trampled upon by David. That incompetent manager repeatedly stole her highly optimized circuit designs and presented them as his own. Just last week, she had developed a revolutionary thermal regulation bypass that saved the company millions. David blatantly put his own name on the research report and soaked up a massive cash bonus. And all the praise from the board of directors. When Grace confronted him in his office, he simply laughed in her face. Whenever she tried to speak up to human resources, he used his authority to threaten her with immediate termination and a ruined reputation in the industry. Grace was forced to swallow her pride and endure the abuse because she desperately needed this meager paycheck. Without it, she couldn't afford the basic components to keep funding the dreams of those poor children who depended on her. The only person in the entire glass-walled building who treated her with an ounce of human kindness was Eric. Eric was the quiet old janitor who always pushed the gray cleaning cart down the hallway. No one ever paid attention to Eric. The hotshot engineers all treated him like a fading, invisible shadow. But Eric was always there, silently observing everything that happened in the high-tech lab. He saw the complex algorithmic blueprints Grace accidentally left on her desk while rushing to grab lunch. He witnessed her collapsing from pure exhaustion, resting her head over piles of sharp motherboards during her unpaid overtime. And he also saw the contemptuous, nasty smirk on David's face every single time he threw a heavy file at her chest. Eric never intervened with loud words or dramatic gestures. He just quietly cleaned up Grace's cluttered workspace and placed a warm cup of coffee next to her keyboard before she arrived. Sometimes, he subtly left a rare, out-of-print book on advanced microarchitecture right where she would easily find it. Not a single person in this magnificent, billion-dollar building knew the earth-shattering truth hidden beneath that frayed, blue janitor's coat. Eric was the visionary founder, the undercover billionaire, who owned this entire global semiconductor empire. He was conducting a highly classified, secret inspection To find a true successor for his legacy, he wanted someone who not only had exceptional technical talent, but also a heart that truly resonated with the pain of everyday people. And today, the ultimate, unforgiving test had finally arrived for everyone in the room. In less than 2 hours, the live presentation for a billion-dollar prototype server system was about to begin. The entire executive board, massive international investors, and tech journalists were already seated in the grand conference room upstairs. Suddenly, a piercing, deafening alarm shrieked from the central server core in the lab. Row after row of diagnostic display monitors simultaneously flashed a glaring, angry red. The core system was experiencing a critical hardware conflict, and the internal temperature was spiking to terrifyingly dangerous levels. If it wasn't fixed immediately, the entire prototype circuit board would melt, catch fire, and the massive project would completely collapse in front of the world. David panicked and rushed to the main control console, shoving a junior technician out of the way. Cold sweat poured down the arrogant manager's forehead like rain. As his hands shook over the keyboard, he frantically typed in a series of standard troubleshooting commands he had memorized from outdated college textbooks. He tried resetting the power grid, overriding the cooling fans, and dumping the cache memory, but it was entirely useless. The system didn't respond to his basic logic, and the fatal error messages multiplied rapidly across the screens. The crowd of senior male engineers backed away slowly, their faces pale with sheer terror. Not a single one of them dared to step up and take responsibility for this impending, career-ending disaster. Dead silence enveloped the massive lab, leaving only the terrifying sound of the cooling fans screaming in absolute desperation. Right at the exact moment when everyone had completely given up hope, Grace stepped forward from the back of the room. She calmly took the steel wrench from the old janitor's steady hand and walked straight toward the smoking server core. "What the hell do you think you are doing? Get away from there right now, before you kill us all. Do you really want to destroy everything we have built?" David roared at the top of his lungs, trying to pull her back by her shoulder with absolute fury. But Grace abruptly turned around, slapping his hand away, and looked him dead in the eye, with a gaze as sharp as a razor. "If you cannot save this machine, shut your mouth and let me do my job." In the face of relentless oppression, the silence of good people is far more terrifying than the insults of the wicked. If you are praying for Grace's courage right now, comment, "I believe in a father's love and justice." The entire room gasped, in absolute disbelief at her sheer audacity. Without wasting another precious second, Grace plunged her bare hands into the scorching hot server core. She completely bypassed the standard, outdated safety protocols that David had foolishly relied on. Instead, she rewired the entire primary cooling matrix, using the exact same revolutionary architecture she had designed for the slum computers. Her bruised fingers moved, with blinding, impossible speed. She forcefully connected melted copper wires, and manually bypassed the corrupted motherboard microchips. David stood frozen, in the dark corner of the room. His face was pale, with a sickening, twisted mix of burning rage, and absolute, paralyzing terror. He desperately, secretly hoped the machine would explode right in her face, just so he could blame the entire billion-dollar disaster on her. But 10 agonizing, sweat-soaked minutes later, the deafening emergency alarm finally stopped screaming. The glaring red warning screens flickered wildly for a brief moment, before turning a stable, beautiful, calming green. The internal core temperature of the priceless prototype plummeted rapidly back to perfectly safe, normal operational levels. Grace took a deep, shaking breath, and wiped the dark, thick grease from her exhausted forehead. She had done the completely impossible. Suddenly, the heavy, reinforced glass doors of the laboratory swung open with a loud crash. The company's elite board of directors marched aggressively into the room, led by the strict, unforgiving chief operating officer. They angrily demanded to know why the critical emergency alarms had been triggered during such a highly anticipated presentation. Before Grace could even open her dry mouth to explain the situation, David forcefully shoved her out of the way. He quickly adjusted his expensive silk tie, puffed out his chest, and plastered a fake, heroic, sickening smile on his sweaty face. There was a minor thermal cascade in the secondary logic board, gentlemen, but I personally stepped in and neutralized the threat immediately. I had to rewrite the entire cooling algorithm on the fly. But as your brilliant head of engineering, I successfully saved the prototype. He lied straight through his teeth, without a single ounce of hesitation, guilt, or shame. The older board members nodded their heads in deep appreciation, fully ready to applaud his fake, stolen brilliance. But from the dark back of the room, a low, incredibly authoritative voice echoed through the tense silence. Is that really the truth, David? Everyone in the massive room turned around, in absolute shock. It was just Eric, the old, invisible, pathetic janitor, holding a dirty gray mop. David's face instantly twisted, in absolute disgust and uncontrollable fury. Who let this filthy garbage man in here? During a highly classified, top-secret executive meeting? Security, drag this disgusting old man out of my sight, and throw him onto the street immediately. David screamed violently, pointing a shaking, aggressive finger directly at Eric's chest. But not a single armed security guard in the room dared to move an inch. Instead, the arrogant chief operating officer, and every single elite, wealthy board member, suddenly gasped loudly. They frantically scrambled to line up perfectly, and bowed their heads in deep, terrifying, silent reverence. Eric slowly took off his worn-out, stained blue janitor cap, and tossed it casually into the trash can. He calmly unbuttoned the cheap, gray, dusty uniform shirt. He revealed a perfectly tailored, incredibly expensive custom black suit. Hidden underneath, the stoic, invisible, weak old man was completely gone. Standing tall before them was the legendary founder and the supreme, untouchable chairman of the entire global tech empire. David's arrogant jaw dropped completely open, as the blood violently and instantly drained from his pale face. His trembling, weak knees finally gave out entirely. He collapsed heavily onto the cold metal floor, in a state of sheer, suffocating panic. Eric pulled a small, detailed black notebook from his inner pocket, and threw it directly at David's sweating face. I have quietly watched you steal this brilliant young woman's patents. For 6 long, miserable months, David. I have watched you ruthlessly threaten her, publicly humiliate her, and claim her pure genius as your own hard work. And now, I just stood here and watched you try to take full credit for saving the very company that she just rescued from your own pathetic incompetence. You are not just fired from this building today. I am personally utilizing all of my resources to ensure you will never, ever work in this industry again. 2 massive, heavily armed security guards immediately stepped forward and grabbed David by his shaking arms. He cried loudly and begged pathetically for mercy, apologizing over and over again. But they dragged him out of the laboratory, exactly like a pathetic, whimpering, defeated dog. Eric then slowly turned to Grace, his piercing, intimidating eyes softening with deep, genuine, profound admiration. Light has finally chased away the suffocating darkness, and true talent has been elevated to the absolute peak of glory. Do not forget to leave your powerful declaration right now. I believe in a father's love and justice. Eric reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a heavy golden document, stamped with the official corporate seal. Grace, your beautiful heart is even more extraordinary and rare than your genius mind. From this exact moment forward, you are the new chief design officer of this entire global corporation. Warm tears of overwhelming, pure joy streamed down Grace's tired, bruised face. The entire room erupted in a deafening, thunderous standing ovation for the young woman they had all ignored. But Eric's true, beautiful plan for this remarkable, kind-hearted woman did not end in that cold laboratory. 6 wonderful months later, at the largest, most prestigious global technology summit in the world. Grace stood confidently on the massive main stage. Under the bright lights, she was proudly presenting her newest, highly affordable microchip, designed exclusively for underprivileged schools. Around the globe, right in the middle of her passionate presentation, Eric walked out onto the stage, holding a small, elegant velvet box. In front of 10,000 cheering, screaming spectators, and millions of people watching online, the billionaire knelt on one knee. He had not just found a brilliant, capable successor to protect his massive empire. He had finally found the only incredible woman whose beautiful, selfless soul could truly complete his lonely, empty heart. Always believe in your own worth, and keep walking forward, with your head held high. Those who resiliently and bravely plant seeds of love will always reap the most miraculous, beautiful miracles. Hit subscribe right now to join us in warming millions of broken hearts every single day. And please leave your final, beautiful message of hope in the comments below. I believe in a father's love and justice.